We've got 2 meetings today with our KUWL council members. So you all are first, and then we have one this evening. We have, well, we'll see how full this agenda is. What we're going to do in just a moment, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Fletcher, who's just going to give some opening words. Jennifer is going to talk about the Model 2.0 framework, which we have been sharing in all of the town halls. And then I will go over just kind of how those town halls have been going, the attendance, and some of the feedback that we've gotten so far. And then for those of you members who have attended any of those, we'd love to hear your thoughts on what you saw at those town halls, any of your observations. And then Dr. Fletcher is going to go through some wows and wonders with us to get your feedback on what Jennifer presents as version 2.0 as we prepare for the hopefully final version. And then Jennifer and I will talk about next steps. All right, so Dr. Fletcher.
Hey, good morning, everyone. It's good to see everyone across this the screen here for me. Just want to kind of give you an update of where we are. First of all, if you've had an opportunity to be a part of these town halls, and if you've been at any of those, I've truly enjoyed them. I think that, first of all, the staff, our team has done a wonderful job of organizing. Dr. Stafford and also many others we've presented about vibrant learning. But the thing to me that has been the most motivational and the most important part of this has been the local accountability piece that has come from our districts. To see the passion and the love that these districts, it almost brings tears to your eyes. I mean, even the people that are presenting, the passion that they see in their local accountability is something that it just gives you such hope and such a positive vibe as we move into the work. The one of the things that I don't, again, in and out of some of our KUWL meetings, we met with Framework 1.0, and just a part of this iterative process, if you will, we've done 4 prototypes. We've done Model Framework 1.0. And one of the major differences with 1.0 and 2.0 actually came from our KUWL Council and also from LSAC and also the Kentucky Board of Education about including the safety and culture survey is one of the federal buckets. So we made that change, pulled out the science, and that came from input from the KUWL Council, that came from input from others too. So the reason why we're at 2.0 is we took the input and tried to give a better version, if you will, with that input for 2.0. So we've used 2.0 and we've gone on the town hall. I don't want to say roadshow because that's been for SEEK, but it's almost been like a roadshow. And we're getting some great input and also want you to see some of that input. And most definitely there'll be a 3.0 as we move forward to see what that final part looks like. So again, the definition that the KUWL Council made in the examples for vibrant learning has been on full display. Then also too, the work of with local accountability and districts with their portraits for the learner, and that part of accountability has been on display also too. So great input. You'll see some wows and some questions as we move forward too, and we look forward to having your input here today. So I think we have next is Dr. Stafford next to give a little bit more.
Thank you, Commissioner, and good morning, everyone. Nice to be with you today. As Dr. Fletcher and Karen has mentioned, we've had a very good response and engagement in our town halls. We've had engaged participants. We've had a really good number of people that have registered, have shown up, and they're engaging in the conversations around a new assessment and accountability systems. So where we start with the framework is that it is around 3 big ideas: encouraging vibrant learning and expanding from the good things that are happening in our schools currently, and expanding that and providing opportunities for students to demonstrate their knowledge and skills in ways that are relevant to them. So giving them opportunities to have student voice, to be able to personalize their experiences that they have in schools. And although we're talking about systems, we're really trying to impact the experiences that the students are having in their school. So meeting the federal requirements in a streamlined way, I think that's one of the main desires that have come out of the Kentucky United We Learn from each of you, that to streamline the federal accountability and open up opportunities and avenues for schools and districts to provide, again, these authentic, more vibrant learning experiences. One of the also another big premise of the Framework 2.0 is collaboration and developing partnerships with our communities.
We're not seeing your slides change, Jennifer.
I think it's sharing the wrong screen.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
There we go.
Can you see that?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you for letting me know. So the other piece is another of the big ideas is collaboration, and that's within the own community and then across the Commonwealth to develop their local accountability, really providing opportunities and encouraging districts to work with their community members and bringing their voices into and supporting our schools, providing our stakeholders, our students, our parents, our community members, our business leaders, chambers of commerce, faith leaders across the community to come in and help with prioritizing what's important to that community and building that partnership and building that relationship with our schools and districts. Across the town halls, we've had several of our districts who are already engaging in these activities that share what they've done and share their processes and share how that they are involving their communities. And what we're seeing with those districts who have done an excellent job of presenting their local accountability is the partnership strengthens the school, and everyone benefits from that. At Eddyville last week, we had Christian County and Dr. Ralston presented a 9th grade expo that they did where students were able to meet with, I think I want to say like 70 something people that talked about just different careers and different avenues that they could take there in Christian County. And so really providing the community ways to get involved with the students in support of their learning, of their opportunities that they provide their students. Are you still seeing my screen?
Yes.
I'm sharing it now, Jennifer. Yeah, I'll share it for you.
Okay, great.
Jennifer, if I may add something here,
Please.
just to give you a small snippet of some of the things that we're seeing. For example, Christian County was talking about vibrant learning and the relevance in vibrant learning. She said we could give you dozens and dozens of examples like this, but one of the things that they're doing is work-based learning as some of their vibrant learning experience. And they actually have a student that is 17 years old that works for a drone company. He has to be excused from class on a regular basis because he's getting calls from all over the world as it relates to drones for this company. And these people all across the world have no clue that they're talking to a 17-year-old. And so as part of his work-based learning and the issue that he's going through in this vibrant learning experience, this is very relevant. That's just one of many experiences that we're seeing that are being shared. So again, there's a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of excitement. especially when our districts are sharing those vibrant learning experiences and their local accountability. So very excited about that.
Absolutely. And I'll share just another Bullitt County shared at OVEC.
Oh, yeah.
That they have a student, and I think he's in third grade. Third grade. He's already written a book, and it is on Amazon. Two books. And it's on Amazon. You can buy it. I mean, these experiences that the students are having are just exciting, and you can see the thrill that the educators have in providing these and sharing those stories as they're presenting. So looking at in opening up ways of collaborating and encouraging these type of experiences across the Commonwealth, developing these networks also across the Commonwealth in support of local districts in advancing these opportunities. So providing ways for districts to come together and support each other, that they can review, they can talk, they can share their stories, they can get critical feedback from each other, and also learn from each other, so that if there are obstacles that one district has faced and been able to overcome, they can share those best practices with another district who they can help keep those them from experiences those obstacles. So that's part of this new system we're envisioning, is to develop statewide supports in districts. And then of course, moving away from that comparison from those color ratings to a more collaborative system. Again, encouraging local innovation and designing the local accountability system and providing that support. The last thing is bringing in an external evaluator that would be for the purpose of identifying exemplars, so that those excellent practices could be lifted up, shared, and then also they could provide some feedback and be like a critical friend toward providing that support for advancing our education system and moving toward systems of support and collaboration. Okay, next slide. So specifically with the assessment and accountability, and you know, these are two different systems. One is assessment, and then the separately are those indicators of performance within the school. This graphic in 3.0 will change. We've had feedback that we're talking about two distinct systems, one federal and one local. So instead of 3 pieces, it'll be just 2 in 3.0, because what we really see is the federal statewide measures in the top right is the federal system, and then the other 2 really explain the local system. So if you could, for this time, just look at those 2 pieces on the left and the bottom left as of the local system. So starting at the top right, the statewide measures that meet those, again, those federal requirements that, again, your desire was, we've heard loud and clear, to streamline them and include student voice. So starting with those 5 bullets on the right, reading and math would be summative assessments in the spring that the department would develop in conjunction with a vendor that would yield those reading and math scores. Then, as you know, we've heard from the beginning that individual student growth is a desire to move toward in a new system, moving away from that change element that we have currently to individual student growth would be from year to year. So think about reading in 3rd grade to reading in 4th grade. And again, that individual student growth is a elementary and middle school indicator only. Then those next pieces for transition readiness, graduation rate, English language progress, and then that climate and safety survey that is currently in our system, those indicators really wouldn't change from what we currently have. So we have heard loud and clear from you all that you wanted student voice in those that federal requirement to meet that bucket and not science. So as Commissioner mentioned earlier, the big change from 1.0 to 2.0 is that the science assessment came out as an indicator in our federal accountability system, and that climate and safety survey remains as it is currently. Now, those 5 pieces of accountability would identify our schools for identification of our federal classification. Those schools that are in need of support, our lowest performing schools that need that additional support from the state. So these 5 indicators currently meet the ESSA, Every Student It Succeeds Act, as it's currently written, and would then satisfy those requirements for federal. And that identification of a CSI, Continuous Support and Improvement, TSI, Targeted Support and Improvement, and then ATSI, Additional Targeted Support and Improvement. Those 5 would yield the results for that. So again, doing away with the colors, and the comparison would be within that federal system for that identification. Now, that last bullet here on the statewide measures, as we've discussed multiple times before, the science assessment is required to be common across the state. So the department would develop, in conjunction with a vendor, statewide assessment and report it. In the framework 2.0, it currently has that we would also develop science assessments grades 3 through 10, so that that the schools would be able to understand and get a reflection of their student performance at every grade level, grades 3 through 10. And they could, if they so chose, then utilize that science assessment in their local accountability system. So again, these pieces here are statewide measures, but the choice for science would be that they could utilize the science scores in their local accountability system. It wouldn't be that they could choose whether or not to give the science assessment, because as we know, it has to be common, it has to be statewide, and it has to be reported as part of the federal requirements, but the choice would be that they could include it in the local accountability system. Moving over then to the local system, we have 2 sets for the local system. The first would be required to be included in your accountability system, but there are some choices around it. Let's start with social studies and writing. The social studies and writing, the current framework has that there would be state provided assessments in social studies and writing that our schools could opt into. And that's a different term for Kentucky. We've never had an opt-in or an opt-out with our statewide assessments. But the idea here is that social studies and writing would be offered grades 3 through 10. So there would be assessments grade 3 through 10. The choice would be whether or not the schools would opt into those social studies and writing statewide assessments, or they develop their own. So if they had a authentic demonstration of learning, or they had a competency-based model for those two content areas, they could utilize their own assessment for their local accountability system. Vibrant learning experiences. Again, the Accelerating Innovation Standing Committee worked hard to develop a menu of options that could be included here in their local accountability system. And as you know, there is a process or opportunity for districts to develop their own vibrant learning experiences and include that. Now, options will continue for the vibrant learning experiences. The schools could start out by including a percentage of students who are included in vibrant learning experiences and include that in their local accountability system. Or if they are more advanced and feel very confident in their vibrant learning experiences, they could include the quality of their students' demonstration of vibrant learning. So again, choice measures on how to include it in their local accountability system. And then finally, that final bullet there of choice measures is one of the areas that we've got the most feedback in our town halls, and especially as we've met with superintendents and boards of directors for the educational co-op. So currently in 2.0, the interim assessment system would be provided by the state for reading and math, and it would be required to replace the school's current interim assessment system. So again, as it stands right now in 2.0, the state would say, here's your interim assessment. Please take this one and do away with your own interim assessment system. We've heard very clearly that even though that we had a survey that said that 67% of districts would be willing to give up their own interim assessment system, the feedback we're getting is that they're not quite there on giving up their own interim assessment system. So that would be such things as MAP, STAR, iReady, those. So we're anticipating, and we're really hoping to hear your feedback on the interim assessment system, that in 3.0, that this interim system becomes an opt-into, that the state would develop interim assessments that would be aligned to the summative assessment. It would be based on Kentucky academic standards, and it would be a cohesive system that the interim assessments would look very similar to the summative assessments. It would be on the same platform, developed by the same vendor. All of those would be aligned. Or if a district did not want to take the states and adopt the states, they could then utilize their own current interim assessment system. So it would be their choice in 3.0, whether or not they use the state provided interim assessment system. And again, that's in reading and math, grades 3 through 10 is where that interim assessment system falls. And then utilize that in some way for student growth. That last piece of the puzzle there is about the developing their own indicators for their interim for their local accountability system, that again is engaging their local community, prioritizing the local pieces that align to their portraits of a learner, and developing their own system there for then meeting the needs of their local community. So providing assurances that they would engage their communities in development of their local accountability system that are aligned to their portrait of a learner. Okay, the last slide.
Jennifer, before we go on, you've got a couple
Yes.
questions in
Oh,
the
okay.
chat. So Ria was asking if you could confirm that science will be tested in 3 through 10.
That is the current proposal. And now, you know that these things, the framework would need legislative changes, and they would need to be supported by the legislators. And again, that goal is for consideration in the 2026 legislative session. And we would also need funding for that expanded assessment. But yes, that's correct. That if this goes through, that the science would be tested, and there would be that opportunity to take that.
And then John, I'm sorry, thought you were done.
No, sorry.
John asked, is the idea that these choice measures will be included in law or regulation, or just in guidance as to what you could do?
And Jennifer, just to clarify, that was in regards to the VLE indicator specifically. You were talking about different ways that VLE could be assessed. I was trying to figure out, is that just going to be guidance that's given to districts, or would that be codified in some way?
Yeah, I would think that, you know, some of the big ideas would be in law in some way. I would think that, you know, just very general terms. I don't think that we would want to go into spelling out the what would be required in those, but you know, having mention of like expanding vibrant learning experiences or something like that would be the idea, or the spirit would be there in some ways.
And then finally, Edna asked, will there be a savings to the district to adopt or opt into the state provided interim assessment system?
Yes, actually it would. So the way we've been explaining it is, if they chose the state, that there would be funding for that, and the state would provide the interim assessment system. If they chose to continue with their own, then they would have to pay for their own system. So if they wanted to stay with their MAP, their STAR, their iReady, then they would pay for that.
Okay, that's all the questions right now.
Right. Thank you, Karen, for, I was not monitoring chat. Ria says, would social be tested each year? Yes. Is testing with science each? Yes. So the social studies and writing, again, would be grades 3 through 10 to be utilized again in the local system, or develop their own and report it. Is testing for science each year 3 through 10 required or optional? At this point, the way it's written would be that it would be required for science grades 3 through 10. The last piece before I turn it over to Commissioner is that again, these systems would need to be developed, and the capacity within our schools and districts would need to be built. We have many groups that right now are in various stages of developing local systems, of developing their portraits of a learner, developing their vibrant learning experiences, but not all. And so we would really look to our local labs of learning and those districts that are on the forefront of developing these local systems to be that support, and then move into a pilot phase, utilizing the knowledge that we've gained from these early adopters to design and implement the new local accountability systems. And then from that pilot phase, then go toward an expansive phase, and then more statewide. So it's going to take several years. We heard from Hardin County at the GREC that they've been doing their local system, and they started, I want to say in 2018 or 2019, and their system won't be ready until like 2 or 3 years from now. So it takes a while to develop these systems, and we'll want to reflect that and assure people and schools and districts that there's going to be support in developing and having a reasonable timeline so that everyone can get their systems developed and be successful. Let me check the chat. It's down. So we're looking for a list of what changed from 2.0 to 3.0. So that would be helpful. Thank you for that, John. And then, so it's written down one place that everyone can reference. So thank you. That's a good suggestion.
Well, one of the
So-
things too, there's a technical document. So in our 3.0, we could probably add that to a technical document of changes from 2.0 to 3.0. I think that would be a good place for that.
So Commissioner, I think I turn it over to you.
To me.
Karen
Oh,
first.
Karen. All right, Karen first.
Yeah, so I just wanted to give you all a quick update on how these town halls have gone. You can see here that we have done 6 of the 9 town halls so far. And for instance, here at the first one, January 15th, the first 3 were actually rescheduled due to the weather. So we do have 3 more coming up in February. So that made January 15th our very first one at CKEC. And we had, I want to say, about 30 people sign up for that one, and we had 95 attend. So it's kind of a phenomenon that we're seeing. Normally people sign up and don't show up, but we are getting 2 to 3 times the number of people show up as those who register. And we did not require registration. So we're really excited to see that so many people are showing up. At the second one on January 16th at KUWL, we had 40 attendees. January 21st was GREC, and we had, again, about 90 attendees. The Spanish Town Hall, we had 15 people sign up, and that's about what we had between what were in person and online. So that was the hybrid. We only had a few people actually attend online. But Alfonso was there. I don't know if Alfonso's on this call or not. He was online with us in order to translate if anyone was online and wanted to speak. So we do have that recorded. All of these have been recorded, and you can go out to the resource page to find all of them. The OVEC meeting on the 29th, we had about 78 attendees. And then that last one, WKEC, our 3.5 hour journey to get there. We had approximately 54 attendees at that one. You can go to the next slide. We have 3 more coming up, as I said. So February 4th, which is tomorrow, we will be heading to southeast, south central. That is a tongue twister. And then on the 12th, we're going to Northern Kentucky, and then the 27th, KEDC. It says tentative on there, but that one has been confirmed. So those are our last 3. And Susan, I don't know if you know offhand how many we have registered for those, but they've all been really well attended. So we've been really excited. And as Jennifer said, they've all been very engaging. So you can go to the next slide. So the way that these have been running, we have Dr. Fletcher just gives an opening statement at the beginning, about 10 minutes, and he's been very good about sticking to his 10 minutes. Then we have either Sarah or someone else from her team who talks about vibrant learning, giving that definition, and just doing a really cool job with getting everybody in the mindset of thinking about a student and then what that learning used to look like, or in some cases still looks like, and how we're moving into those vibrant learning experience and what that begins to look like. And then at each town hall, we have a different district that is coming, somebody usually local to that area. And as Dr. Fletcher said, this is where everybody just is really super engaged and interested to see what's going on right around the corner from them. And then finally, Jennifer does the framework 2.0, which is what she just shared with you now. And then we just take a few minutes and ask everybody to talk with a neighbor, think about what they like about the system and what questions do they still have about it. Go to the next slide. So on the next slide, we have some of the key observations. Sorry, I was getting ahead of myself. So as I said, participants have been very engaged. The material's been well received. We have had lots of media coverage as well. I think every single one has had at least a reporter show up, somebody from a magazine show up, or news crews there to watch what's going on. And thanks to all of you, we have been very well prepared for all of the questions that have come in. I think there have maybe been 1 or 2 questions that have come up that weren't expected, but everything else really, it's things that you all brought up in all of our meetings over the last year or 2 years to get us to this point. So a huge thank you to all of you for everything that you've done to get us here this far, because it has made a huge difference as we take this out to the communities. And then the other thing, social studies teachers have been showing up, especially the first 3, I would say. We had lots of social studies folks show up to those first 3.
Karen, Betty Edwards has asked, do we know the breakdown of who attended the town halls, e.g. parents, educators, staff?
It's mostly educators for sure. We've had a couple where we've had more parents there. I don't have the numbers in front of me. We have been capturing that for those that sign in. So as long as they sign in and circle which group they're a part of, we have that. But just observing, it has been mostly educators.
We've had some legislators to show up too.
Yeah. Okay. Do you want to go through all the wows and wonders, or would you like me to do this?
I can do that.
Okay.
Some of the wows, as we talk about, is what we're hearing is that flexibility, giving districts the opportunity to showcase their programs that's important to their communities. That flexibility of how that community input and that collaboration of working together to show how do we give evidence of the product that we're putting out with students, so that our local parents, our business leaders, our community people are getting the product that they expect from their schools. So that local flexibility is, whereas you may have one district that really has student well-being as part of it, whereas another may have some other indicators as it relates to their portrait of the learner, or that flexibility has been something that's been a wow so far. Then also, too, the emphasis on preparing students on a prosperous Kentucky. One of the things that Dr. Stafford in her presentation talks about, do we know what the future looks like? Can you guess what it looks like 50 years from now? And then she kind of drops down to 4 years from now. And sometimes we even ask the question, do we even know what it looks like tomorrow? As far as the changes and what's going on within everything from AI to other things, there's so much change going on, but the portraits of a learner that's going on in our districts have these enduring skills, whether it be collaboration, communication, engaged citizen, all that, where they're lifelong learners. There's all these different lifelong characteristics that students will build upon over and above just taking a written test. So again, how are we helping students to be prepared for that global economy and that industry, but also having those enduring skills, if you will, to be a part of that global market. So that's something that's been a while also too. The other thing too is support for the diverse learning needs. You know, what about those students that don't test well or special needs? As a matter of fact, Shelby County gave some great examples of some things that were defenses of learning that were going on with their special needs students. And then also too, we had others to talk about how they were like some of the defenses of learning were in students' native language given to people who speak their native language, and giving them the opportunity to celebrate their culture, celebrate who they are, but in a realm of this is how our learning within our district has helped us to get to this point. So that support for diverse learning has been another focus that we've seen in a while from our people. So, you know, yes, we really focus in on, we have two areas. We look at the federal accountability piece and streamlining that as much as possible, and also too, having that flexibility, that preparing for a prosperous Kentucky, but also meeting diverse needs through the local accountability system. So next slide, please. Some of the wonders talk about equity and consistency and a local accountability and content area. For example, social studies teachers, as was pointed out, asked about the parameters, the requirements. Yes, we're saying that needs to be a part of local accountability, but what does that look like? So we've challenged some of our teachers, the social studies teachers, to give us some thoughts that they have on that. As far as what should that look like? Yes, we're offering these assessments 3 through 10 that districts can utilize for social studies and writing, as a matter of fact, or they can have their own competency-based system that they feel like is a better system to be a partner of the local accountability. So a lot of questions as it relates to social, especially early on, but that's kind of tempered a little bit, I guess you will, as we moved on. But again, that idea that the state has to give a required test before it's important is something that we've tried to address. And again, making that a part of how does that look for local accountability? Implementation and practicality, how would it be achieved? The need for clear models and plans. So one of the things that we're learning is they're wanting a lot of guidance, you know, as far as when we talk about local flexibility, everybody wants local flexibility, but they also want to give them guidance on what that looks like. So they're excited about flexibility. They're excited about the implementation, but they're also like, how do we get there? And so we really rely on that, on our local districts and that onboarding where these are the districts that are doing the local accountability now. This is what it looks like. How can we partner you with others in order to grow that type of system? Then also support for teachers. One of the things that was brought up as a point of emphasis, if we're looking at these interim assessments, can we offer a part of our RFP of having the system or the company to provide as much information such as diagnosing the student's needs, and how do we make sure that that looks in an MTSS or an individualized learning plan for students? What kind of supports can we give? The other things too that are being discussed is, you know, we talk about, for example, science is not required to be a part of the formula for CSI-TSI, and we're not in that. We don't have that 2.0. But some folks are saying, do we really need to have assessments on science 3 through 10 in every grade level? Or do we need to do that in a grade level band? Right now in 2.0, we have it being given every grade level 3 through 10. And really some of the ideas of that is trying to get away from this. You know, sometimes districts will have, they'll give science, you know, they'll really are in emphasis science in 4th grade because that's where it's assessed, but maybe not third and 5th grade. So having those assessments in there to help districts to align what they're doing grades 3 through 10 as far as it relates to our standards. The one other thing that came up in one of the sessions, one of the town halls, is when we look at our interim assessments, instead of just having those for 3 through 10, can we also have an aligned system that's K through 2 also? Could we include in our RFP to say that we want whatever those interim assessments aligned with the summative would be a K through 10? That way districts could utilize that one system as opposed to using a K1-2 and then switching over to whatever the state is at the 3rd grade level. For example, so many districts have, they'll provide maybe STAR early on, or even early star in kindergarten that's aligned to their star assessments later on. I think there's some assessments in math that reach a lower level than third grade. But again, not adding when I say accountability, not part of that that federal model, but having more for teachers to be able to utilize, very similar to what they do with their math, star, iReady, those type of tools. So again, overall, it's been really good, but some great input. And of course, that's one of the reasons here today with what you've heard, what kind of wows and wonders that you may have as we move forward. Anything else? Next slide, please.
That's it.
That's it. All right, I'll turn it back over to Karen.
So yeah, so now we're looking to you all from what you've heard. What thoughts do you have on Framework 2.0? What questions do you still have? What do you like? What don't you like? And I believe you should all be able to unmute yourselves, so.
Okay, I was at the OVAC session, and a couple of observations or perceptions from me personally is that I know what we've been talking about. I know the whole thing. I fear as if I'd gone there with someone without any knowledge, I would have been confused. So that's my reaction on that. The other thing is we continue to talk. As you all know, I've always had this concern about equity across the state. Some of our districts are doing phenomenal things that others haven't started, and I think our responsibility is to every student. So how do we ensure that clearly it's going to be a strong professional development program that's going to be required as systems was developing. The other thing, harking back to my Cara days and remembering vividly the uproar from elementary teachers and from teachers as a whole, because they didn't feel they'd been involved. Now, we've had teachers on the KUWL, so that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about individual teachers, and you all may have done this. So I guess part of my question is, have you gone to KEA? Have there been strong meetings with KEA so that members can react to this? Because while under Cara, teachers thought they had a huge burden, under this, it's not a burden. They have a great opportunity, but they are much more engaged in this whole system than we were earlier. So I don't want us to get into the same situation we went through then. So that's my concern. I don't want us to go through, so agreed we had to develop rapidly, and we probably didn't involve teachers as much, but I still remember my conversations with elementary teachers, and they were up in arms about what we were doing. And I would ask them, well, do you want to go back to what we had? And they said, no, but we're not ready for this. They didn't, you all are too young to know, but they didn't have any countdown moments, any place to go because we changed so much. So I would just want to make sure that we don't do that again, that up front, we have a real strong involvement of teachers. And I appreciate the social studies teachers being there the other day and asking some questions that I had. So that's just this whole issue of preparation and involvement in ownership, I think, are going to be critical. And I know the districts some of the districts are doing phenomenal jobs on that local accountability, and it's exciting to hear what some of these students are doing. I just want to hear that across the state, and it's going to take some time to get there, but I think it's also going to take involvement in order to get ownership. If we don't have ownership, we'll lose it. We just will. The other thing, just a thing on the town meetings, is that I know we had those individual conversations, which we had, but then those didn't get to the total, didn't get to the whole group. So you asked some people questions, but then the questions didn't go beyond the two of us. So I don't know if the next ones, if you could do something more that they are to share those out, because, you know, I was with a gifted teacher and she had some questions. She didn't voice them. She had them, but they haven't gone anyplace now. So, so if there's any way when you have that, if you're going to have talk to your neighbor, then that needs to get beyond those two people or those three people. And sometimes just asking to someone, do you have comments? I think the questions are wonderful. I would like to have more time to hear more input from more people. So if I have anything, that would be a huge suggestion, is provide more time at the end or interspersed into it to hear what people were thinking. I have to feel that some people walked away still with questions, but we ran out of time.
Are we, as far as we're offering those cards where everybody is sending questions in and we're sending those back with answers? So that's one of the things that, you know, I agree that, well, there's been a couple of town halls that we ended maybe a few minutes early because the questions had stopped. But there's been a couple that have been more questions. What we've asked them to do is put those on those cards with the contact, give them to us so we can send those answers back. So
We have both cards where they can write it down and hand it to us, and there's also the QR code where they can type it in, and we are collecting those. And I would say most of ours went longer, at least a few minutes longer, because of the questions. And Dr. Fletcher and Jennifer stayed around for anybody that had additional questions. So
I've been the last one to leave. I mean, our team has been the last people to leave every time. You know, most of them, we've been there probably an hour after.
We're always there. I'm just saying, it's just my observations, and having lived through this with Kara, been in your seat during Kara, it's just some of my observations, and I hopes that we don't repeat some of those things that happened.
Well, I think that I agree that we want to make sure we have buy-in, and that's one of the reasons there's been a lot of surveys that have been put out. And then too, also listening to, like, for example, our social studies teachers with what does those parameters look like, wanting them to give us back information. We've had a lot of great input back from, like, for example, those board of directors meetings. And one of the questions or one of the comments that has been made in every single board of directors meeting is, we're listening. We're listening. And that's something that I've been very thankful for, because, you know, when you look at 4 different prototypes, and then our second, then another model framework is making sure we're listening. The key there is, how do we make sure teachers have that voice? Now, I do meet with KEA later on today. I have a meeting with them at 7 o'clock tonight, and I'll talk to them to see how they feel about the meeting too, and see about that accountability model. But they have a legislative update online with all KEA members. So I do have some time with them tonight to see how they feel. So I can try to get some feedback from them tonight also too. So that would be a good, that's one of the topics that I'm going to have to talk with them tonight about that. But now you're absolutely right. The last thing I'll say too is about the onboarding. Jennifer's done a really good job, and part of this, we're talking with the KUWL Council, and Ms. Edwards, you probably talked about this too, is that need for that onboarding. We can't just say we flip a switch in 2026 and then we expect teachers to have it in the fall of 2026. That's why we're saying, you know, this first year, it's more about piloting. It's more about making sure that we have some great exemplars out there. And then also too, developing that professional development for teachers, because some districts have great professional development now, but how can we partner with them? And then as that time goes on, for example, I think Woodford County started this work a couple of years ago, and they said they wouldn't feel like the entire process would be implemented until 28, 29. And that's with a group that's been working on it already, because they want to make sure that everybody in their district is aware. So how do we help facilitate that and be a part of that? But you're absolutely right. 1, buy-in is important, and then making sure that we get that. And then 2, how do we make sure that that we give to help facilitate that professional development and to collaborate among districts. That's probably been the strongest thing that we've seen so far, is how, like, Woodford County has been working with Rowan. They've been working with Clark. They've been working with Logan. they worked with Johnson County and Clark County. I may have mentioned Clark County, but they were working together to develop those local accountability models, even though it doesn't look the same. But they're trying to learn from each other about what's this professional development look like? What are you doing? How can we incorporate that? That one of the strongest pieces about this is that collaboration, not only within the district, but outside. But you're absolutely right about having buy-in and professional development. That way our teachers are not overwhelmed as we move forward. I think this, as you put it very well, this is an opportunity for us. We don't want it to be a burdensome load for teachers as we move forward.
Thank you, Betty. Dr. Flynn, you have a comment in the chat. Would you like to unmute?
Yes, let's see. I put a few comments. So one thing, my first comment, I think, was around being intentional about connecting this work to statutory language around the core capacities for students, which is KRS 158.645, and the goals for schools in Kentucky, 158.6451. I do think, especially in my work with legislators, when they see the connection between existing statutory language, and this is such powerful language, I think, that people really hold on to, that there's an opportunity to be really explicit and intentional with that. And then I also, commend the commissioner has done a brilliant job responding to that mindset shift, that some of this is a function of when even what Betty was talking about, and I agree with her, we've got to help them, be on the journey with us as we kind of diagnose and design how we're going to implement. And so we've got, I think the more we can be even more explicit and intentional in that communication about the paradigm shift, moving from a high stakes assessment focus, which we've lived in, for 30 plus years. And so many of our educators, not only their professional life is in that, their student life was also in that high stakes environment. So making that shift is a really important piece. But I think as Commissioner Fletcher has talked about that mindset shift, I see heads nodding, but I think we can, continue to build that as well. And then just in that last conversation, the phase-in process, as I've talked to superintendents, some of them that are reticent or concerned, helping them see those phases towards statewide transformation and implementation, that can be a long runway to ensure that with those capacities are in place to address, their ability to implement. And but being very intentional about speaking to that will be helpful. The last thing I wanted to mention is this idea of when we start talking about the assessment results or communicating results, we want this system to be a truth-telling, trust-building mechanism, that, for students, for families, for educators, and policymakers, employers, and others, right? And one of the things I think we have an opportunity is, and we may have lost our focus on this a little bit over the years, and with all the disruptions that have occurred between, as Betty talked about, the beginning of CARA and where we were going, proficiency, we stated up front back then, was a high bar. It was, but a bar worth shooting for. We want every kid at or above proficiency, right? And we acknowledged at that time it was an above grade level standard. But what's happened over time is that it gets used interchangeably between on grade level and proficiency. And I've heard Commissioner Fletcher talk about an on grade level designation possibility. And so one of the things I've been thinking about is could we have a system that values proficiency as that high bar that we're shooting for, but then also gives a clear indication of where we are, where a student is on grade level. And then, of course, that strong desire to move to a growth. Because when I talk to parents, what do they want to know? Is my kid on grade level or above? Or is my kid growing or not? And then we have this proficiency goal that we're shooting for. And so I'll put in the chat a little idea I have about that, but I think there's opportunity there as I've heard some discussion at these meetings. But kudos to everyone. Y'all have done a wonderful job engaging folks in this work, and just want to give a big shout out to Commissioner Fletcher and team for a job well done. Let's keep the momentum going.
Dr. Flynn, thank you so much for that. And again, I do want to echo just thank you so much to our team. Our team has done a phenomenal job. But I do want to talk a little bit about, and this discussion has occurred more in our board of directors meetings with superintendents, more so than what it has at the town halls, is that interim assessments and our summative assessment, or especially our interim assessments, to have, again, we have to assess grade level content. So this interim assessment could look like assessing grade level content at its core, but wrapped around that is that adaptability piece so that it would assess more than just grade level content. So we'd have grade level content at the core, but also too, that way you could get we could talk about proficiency on grade level. And then also too, that a student, if they take the test, that, we get that grade level part, but also too, if a student's in third grade, can we say that they're on the 4.5 grade level? So that's the other thing that we're talking about with this new assessment system, is to not only talk about proficiency, but what also being able to give a grade level equivalency to students too, and to parents, because let's face it, that's what parents really understand, what they can gravitate to and they can get a part of. Whereas proficiency, we've always said, has been a high bar, exactly what you said, but making sure that we have that grade level equivalency as a part of those interim assessments, and possibly our summative assessment also. Good point. Thank you for that. Also, too, thank you for that point about the statutory language. I've been looking at those two KRS statutes and see it, and we haven't had that conversation all here, but really tying that back to those core capacities that's in statutory language, I think will really resonate, especially with lawmakers. Great point there. Thank you for that. That could be part of our technical document in 3.0, as a matter of fact.
Dr. Flynn, let's move to Edna. Edna's looking for her unmute button. I cannot hear you, Edna. It does look like you unmuted, but I'm not hearing you. Edna, I'm going to come back to you. Let's go to Jessica. Jessica Jenkins still on?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Oh, yeah, I did put a bunch of stuff in the chat because my kiddo's here. And I didn't know if he would start like the bloody murder screaming that happens sometimes when parents are on the phone. So I was just going to say really quick that I am a little like concerned about, I know why it's really important for schools to have like that. They've been doing this test their way. All their teachers are trained in it. The kiddos are used to it. And that's a really big shift to say, like, now we're taking these like math tests and reading tests away. You're not doing iReady anymore. Now you're doing like the state recommended one. But I really worry about having that having the access all year round to testing, because like what we see at our school in my district is they're just having kids set and do iReady in class, teaching to the test. The kids' iReady scores are skyrocketing. And so it'd be nice if the state had a little more control over like the testing, if that makes sense. And then the other thing is, I saw we were talking about the science assessments, and when I was teaching middle school science, it was always really frustrating because they would have the test, but I wouldn't even cover that standard until 7th grade. But they were doing that test in like 5th grade. So that was always something that was really frustrating. It's like, we haven't even learned this yet. And, or you learned it in 3rd grade and you haven't even touched it now that you're in 5th. So it would be kind of, I like that, having that like yearly, this is just to see how you're doing in science and where you're at kind of thing.
Thank you, Jessica.
Karen, Edna requested that we read
Yeah,
out her question.
Yeah, I saw that. So, and I'm just going to go back to your first one. Where can I access the technical assistance document? And that is all out on the resource page. So if you just go to the KUWL Council page at the top of, as soon as you go to KDE's page, you'll see KUWL Council, click there, go to the resource page. Everything we have is out there on that page. If you have trouble finding it, just let me know. And then, and this other question is, have EPSB and Kate been involved? That's a good question.
Well, we've had the associate commissioner to be involved with from EPSB is within our
Yeah.
department.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's Meredith. Of course, Meredith's been very involved. Kate, I'm not sure about that, honestly. But we can look into that and see what we need to do for them. And okay, I'm gonna go down to see who else.
Representative Tipton, I saw you unmuted. Did you want to say something?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can
Yes.
hear you.
I'm having difficulty figuring out how to mute and unmute. I apologize. I got on here late today, so I'm a little behind. I'll just make one comment. Jim's comments on that KRS 158645 and 6451. I've actually last couple of years been really reading over those, and I think that's actually in the Rose decision. I believe that language came straight from the Rose decision, as I recall, and I think those are important concepts we need to look at. And we need to evaluate, see if they need to be evaluated and updated. We have changes in technology, changes in information. The world's different than it was back then. So I like the idea of incorporating that because that is our goal, is to prepare students for the future. And if I can figure out how to unmute, I'll try not to disturb anybody.
You're totally fine. Okay, let me see who else is in here that's commented. Art, did you want to unmute and share what you have in the chat?
Sure, I'm happy to. I had an earlier comment that I think that the buy-in issue, I think it'll be much better given what I heard from the folks at the town hall meeting, where district folks were responding to each other to ask questions about how to include students with disabilities and English learners, rather than looking to KDE to get the answers for those local accountability things. I think the more that they rely on each other, the better buy-in we'll get, and it'll be better than Kara and Kiris. I'm an old guy, so I remember Kara and Kiris as well. The other thing I do worry a little bit about, sort of the communications challenge of setting a bar for on grade level that's different than proficient. So I worry that you have to be really careful not to tell parents that their kid is performing on grade level but not meeting expectation, or that Kentucky is okay with students that are not yet proficient. Proficient was ideally set to indicate that students were meeting the expectations for students in a grade. And Kentucky has a higher level than proficient. Now, it may be that we've set proficient in a bad place, but I think we'll have to go back and sort of think about really carefully how to make that communications effort work. And I work in a couple of other states that have sort of a lower bar for, certain things that, states that have, requirements for promotion or requirements for graduation that are tied to their state assessments, and they set a lower bar than proficiency. And it's always a really tough communications challenge. And they always get questions about, how do we justify saying that this kid is ready whenever this kid doesn't meet what we say are the minimum requirements? So I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying be really careful and think really long and hard about the communications effort for that.
Well, and you're absolutely right. Thank you for that input. Even if you try to talk about NAEP, basic, below basic, or proficient, and how that looks for, that's a total different definition than proficiency for us. So again, it's defining and making sure we're very intentional on what that looks like. We don't want to cause confusion, but we also want to put it in terms that people understand. So thank you so much for that.
I think I got everybody who put something in chat. Please feel free to raise your hand if I missed you, or if you have anything else you'd like to add to the conversation.
I just wanted to say, I had a text from a friend who's a principal in another district after some of the town halls, and one of her 5th grade teachers was like, if I'm assessed in science, I am resigning next year. So they were already like quoting all these things that are on Facebook and things like that. So, and I said, well, I'm not certain on what grades exactly. I said, but I don't really know the details of that, but so that's why I had thought about asking that. That's why I asked that question. And I do know, like I said, one of her teachers was already just in a panic mode about one more thing. But I also know that it's going to look different now. And I do know that when you are not assessed in something, especially I have the elementary perspective, you don't tend to focus on that as much. And that's just human nature. But I do think that there will be, or it already has been, a lot of, just panic around, oh my gosh, this is too much. I can't do this, because they already feel like they're drowning in the current system, only because they care so much, not because, it's apathy or lack of wanting to do well. I think we're talking about really good teachers who just have really high expectations for themselves and their students. And so they just want to make sure they can perform and do well, and are just already feeling that sense of panic. So that's sort of why I typed those concerns. And
well, and you're absolutely right. And our goal is to provide districts allow them to provide more information for the progression of students' learning of science. But how do you balance that with, so many, like, we're not going to put out a ranking system for science, but we have to give a science test, at grade. Now, what's required is at grade bands, and we have to give one in elementary, we have to give one in middle, one in high. So what we were hoping is to provide those other assessments so that teachers could prepare as they move throughout and say, okay, this is our progression in science as we move forward. But, on the other hand, some just feel like, okay, we're going to get, there's an assessment burden, if you will, if we're going to get another test to give. And since they're opt-in, we've even talked about those really have to be given at the end of the year. This is not necessarily a part of the, it's not part of the federal accountability system that we're looking at CSI, TSI, ATSI. It's more along the lines of, could there be more flexibility when you give a social studies assessment or a science assessment? But I know the science has to be uniform. Let me pull back a little bit. The science has to be uniform. It has to be throughout. But for example, social studies, what does that look like? So it's a great point of, trying to be supportive without being burdensome, if you will, as we move forward. So that's some questions as how do we handle that science all the way through. So that's a great point. Thank you for that.
And I'll add too that that's one of the priorities within the framework, that it does prioritize science, social studies, and writing, that helps address that for our teachers, so that it is prioritized and provided then the opportunity to not only see the importance of it in per grade band, but actually every single year in putting it grades 3 through 10 every single year elevates the importance of being taught it at every grade level.
Thanks, Jennifer. Delaney, you had a question?
Yeah, don't know if it's really a question, just more of an observation. And I think Dr. Flynn touched on this a little bit earlier when we think about how do we ensure that we're attending to whether it's existing statutory language or perhaps new statutory language that needs to be developed based on this new model. I keep wondering about in relation to portraits of a learner and how those are implemented at a local level. And of course, Kentucky has a statewide portrait, but you know, we're hearing from employers every single day around the importance of durable skills, the lack of students not being prepared with these skills, especially at a time when more students are graduating high school and either directly entering the workforce or choosing to pursue a combination of some sort of post-secondary education and careers. So I've been thinking a lot about how do we ensure that we're really being intentional on not just valuing those durable skills competencies and developing those competencies. Sure, you know, a district may have a portrait, but how are they actually implementing those portraits? How is it tied to vibrant learning experiences? And then how are we measuring those durable skills? And so I just keep looking at this current model and I wonder, are we being really intentional on let's make sure that those students actually are getting those durable skills through whether it's in our statewide system of accountability or in the local system. Like right now, there is that portrait of a learner component in the local measure piece, but all districts may not choose to adopt that as a local measure or a choice measure. And how are we integrating that into like core academic learning? And, you know, Kentucky, we've already got existing statutory language with the Essential Workplace Ethics Instruction Program, which is KRS 158.1413. So I think that's on my mind a lot is how are we making sure that we're valuing what employers are really expecting from students, and then not creating an add-on to teaching and learning, but how do we integrate that in as part of, again, vibrant learning, and then really just measuring those durable skills. What could that look like? So just kind of throwing that out there because I know we've talked about that over the past couple of years quite a bit. So I just wanted to resurface that.
That's a great point. And one of the things, like, you know, right now we're relying heavily on that local accountability model for districts to develop that. And what we could do is implement that into that third party evaluator group that comes in to say, these are the things that are going on in this district that, as it relates to profile of learner, that could be exemplars across the state. But the question is, how do you require that versus having that grow within the district and presenting that out to others? Because we have I think we're approaching 150 districts with a profile of a learner, but we also know that well over, you know, some of those is just a picture. How do you really make sure that's been implemented within the classroom? And like, for example, we're hearing stories of defenses of learning that's going on at the senior level, and students are walking out with job offers from local employers. How do we make sure that that's happening everywhere? So I think that, and I don't have a great answer for that right now, but maybe that third party evaluator that comes in, this could be a part of that review process that happens every 3 years to say, okay, these are the things that are going on. That's a possibility. But again, to have that required in the vibrant learning is a lot of local flexibility on how we do that. We're trying to walk that line, I guess we could say.
Representative Tipton asked another question in the chat. How does the proficient assessment on KSA compare to NAEP? I believe these differences may confuse legislators and the public.
I'll have to defer. Jennifer, do you have an answer on that? I mean, there's a difference, but I don't have the actual numbers on that. So Jennifer, what are your thoughts?
We just went out with NAEP scores, but we would not put the proficiency beside any of those. with that, because there are differences in what is measured, what's reported, those different types of descriptions on those performance level. So, there's not a direct comparison, but we just went out with those, and I don't have those in front of me right now for the name. And Representative Timpson, I think that's what Art was trying to say, that since there are differences and there are differences in terms, terminology, and then the skill level at each of those, I think that is the concern, that it would be confusing.
Can you hear me? I think I got my mic on.
Yes.
I've heard legislators get up and quote NAEP scores. I've heard them get up and quote KSA scores and percentages. And I think there's just a true confusion that they don't relate to each other. And I think maybe we just need to do a better job of informing the legislature and the public about these differences. And I think, to me, NAEP shows you a long-term trend, where KSA is more of a direct what's going on today. But I just think we need to do a better job of explaining those differences, so we don't get that they're almost used interchangeably, but they shouldn't be used that way.
Thank you. Anything else?
Well, and to make another comment about KSA, our proficiency is based on Kentucky standards, grade level standards. Whereas NAEP is a different, even how they define proficiency is different too. So you're right. We probably need to do a better job. But on the other hand, how do we do that, Representative Tipton, without them saying they're making excuses?
Persistence.
Just give
You're never going to get away from people making comments about this and that. You just have to be persistent and giving the right information. And over time, I think most people will start to get it.
I will say this, Representative Tipton, we've had more and more legislators we've had more and more conversations with legislators over the past few months. Than I've been very pleased with that. And we're so thankful for that. So, and I'm not saying everybody's reaching out to us, not saying that at all, but the conversations between KDE and our legislators have been very rich and engaging. We really appreciate those opportunities. So let me go ahead and put that out there. So again, you're right. There's a lot of things that we need to define a little bit better and get that message and be persistent about it.
Looking, Roland has a comment in. Roland, do you want to come off mute?
No, I don't have anything really to add. My concern about the anecdotal stories are they're great and we do need them, but they're anecdotal. And the question becomes, going back to Delaney's point and Betty's point earlier, it's about equity. I mean, how do we ensure this system is preparing all students? And if we don't have some way of measuring that and consistency, then we run a dangerous precedent here. And it's always been one of my concerns. I'm a firm believer in the power of the work we're doing and the work that's going on in the districts. But I do want to ensure that we are setting all students up for success.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Okay, we can talk about next steps. I know that we are looking at a framework 3.0. We still have, like I said, 3 town halls to go. So we don't want to put anything in writing just yet until we see what everybody has to say. And Susan put the numbers in earlier about how many have registered. And if we keep the pace of doubling or tripling, those look like they're going to be really good town halls as well.
We also have our policy advisors reviewing now.
I'm sorry.
We also have our policy advisors looking at technical.
Yes, policy advisors within the department and working with our partners are looking at the model right now. looking to see what changes need to be made for that. We would like to bring everybody together for a virtual convening in March. So we are looking at March 20th to bring everyone together to again look at version or framework 3.0. That would be right before the board meeting. So this is the point where we are hoping to get to a framework that all of you would support and endorse before going to the board at the end of March. So any comments on that March 20th, any issues with that date, or any thoughts on that? Okay, Jennifer, that was all I have for next steps. Anything else you want to add?
Sure, I'll just add just a couple of details around 3.0. As I've mentioned, we do know that there will be some changes. We know the graphic, I've mentioned that will be 2 pieces instead of 3. That's been a point of confusion that we heard early on. So we know that graphic will change. We know that for the interim assessments that it's going to be more of an option to provide the districts the flexibility to either opt into the state required or they could utilize their own. And then we heard from John had a suggestion about putting some more details about the changes in the technical document, so we can provide that. So those are some of the big pieces of the changes for 3.0 that we know will go into that. We have again some discussion around the K3 the K2 included in that that possibility for the interim assessments as well. So we're getting close. I feel like, you know, where we started with framework 1.0 or prototype 1.0 back in May or the June timeframe of 2024, and we've continued to listen. We've continued to refine and frame this, and so we're getting close, and we appreciate each of you in the work that you're doing and your commitment here to this part. So that March 20th date will be the discussion of framework 3.0 and moving forward with then that as the framework.
All right, I'm just looking there. A couple folks are putting in some issues with March 20th. It's the last day of the junior ACT window. This would not be a full day, let me say that, and it would not be in person. This would be another virtual. And I see that Betty has asked that it be later in the afternoon. So yeah, we'll have to look at all of that. We'll probably send something out as far as timing goes for that day. We do have to have it before the LSAC meeting and before the board meeting. But we also need to have time between the last town hall and the board meeting. So we are dealing with a very small window here of when we can have that meeting with all of you before we take it to the board. So that's what we're trying to do. But Susan and I will probably put something together to see what's the best time that day to get everybody involved. Okay. Any other thoughts or comments? Okay. And we are done. Any final comments?
Final comment is, first and foremost, thank you for your dedication. There's been so much work and so much time that's been put into this. And what I've told people is not only has the KUWL Council helped steer this, there's been thousands of educators that have contributed to this through L3 networks, through, I mean, I think it would be safe to say that we've had thousands of educators that, and other people, not only from our KUWL Council, but also to districts that have keep presenting and keep adding into this local accountability model. So this is something that has really grown organically, and we really appreciate the leadership of the KUWL Council. We're even talking about what's our next steps for the KUWL Council as far as some other ideas as we move forward. I will share with this group that Kentucky has been asked to be one of 6 states that nationwide to be a part of reimagining the high school experience. You know, maybe some work there with the KUWL Council as we move forward with that too. But right now, I feel like we're in a good place. We still have some work to do. We've got 3.0 coming, some great suggestions here today. And then hopefully we'll have something we can all fully support and be ready to go for the legislation in 2026. But thank you all so much for where we are now.